Bryce, welcome to the show. Love to have you on again.
Oh, hi, Michael. Glad to be here.
You've heard my introduction. There is a growing debate in the Western world, and it is a clamour now in some cases, to look at ways in which we can restrict the most negative influences of social media, particularly amongst our young. Now, for a long time in New Zealand, our job in this country has been done by a group called NetSafe, who have been prominent in arguing for protections for people, and more importantly for the more deleterious effects of social media to be regulated or criticised or excluded, in actual fact, from the parvenu. You're arguing that they're failing in that role now and suggesting a reason why. Can you elaborate, please?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't quite categorise it like that. I think NetSafe play a very useful role in public debate around internet issues. They've got a deserved reputation for really leading the debate on these things. And when it comes to social media, they are a big part of that debate. They have lots of very good perspectives on this. What's just been surprising is that this week they're kind of going against the grain of suggesting that a ban on under 16-year-olds having access to social media they think it's a bad idea, and so they're kind of out of sync with at least the Australians and a growing concern amongst New Zealand politicians about that under 16-year-old group. That's not to say that NetSafe don't have a concern here. They're just disagreeing with this idea of a ban, and I'm not sure they're necessarily wrong. I mean, I take this issue very seriously. I'm certainly a technophile, and I'm sort of glued to my devices quite a lot, but I've come to realise how much of a negative thing this is for human society, or at least younger people, when they're still developing. And so my argument is that NetSafe could be compromised because they are funded by a lot of tech companies, including the company that owns Facebook and Instagram, which is called Meta. And so they give quite a considerable amount of money to them, apparently. And so I'm not saying that necessarily means they're being soft on social media, but it's not a good look, should we put it that way?
No, and you've made the analogy, I think, in the article that I read of yours, particularly with the tobacco industry, where if you were being funded by a tobacco company and your job was to protect public health, you'd find that a bit of a strange contradiction. That analogy is true, isn't it?
It does seem odd to have a watchdog on technology, a watchdog on social media companies that is part funded by those social media companies. And I mean, I don't think you can ban that. I don't think they should necessarily turn down funding from that, but they need to be able to defend it. They need to be transparent about it, and we're not seeing that at the moment. So when NetSafe is in the media arguing for their case, I think they need to sort of step up and say that they do take money from social media companies. And I'm not necessarily saying their arguments are wrong. I'm quite agnostic about this idea of whether we ban social media for under 16-year-olds. I think we are too inclined to just ban things and think that those problems will go away, whereas NetSafe point out, well, it will push it underground, it will have lots of other unintended consequences. I'm sympathetic to some of those arguments, but I'm just also a bit sceptical knowing that they're funded by Facebook, and they might just be pushing that party line.
Yeah, except the problem, it seems to me, is the funding of organisations or non-government organisations who have, if you like, a formative role at all, by anybody.
Yeah.
I'm actually thinking of Victoria University, for example, the people who employ you, funding various news media outlets in this country.
Yeah.
And I'm going, okie dokie, how independent will, for example, Newsroom be, or the spin-off, if Victoria University is in actual fact funding their journalistic enterprises? It seems a clear contradiction to me.
Look, I can't really comment on Victoria University's funding of Newsroom, but I would say in general that we do need more scrutiny on who owns the media, who gives financial contributions to it, what role that might play, especially in any sort of editorial decisions. And I think there's a public demand for that. I don't think media nor universities or anyone else are going to get away with having all that as kind of a commercially sensitive private deal. It does have to probably be out in the public. And again, there's not anything necessarily wrong with that. That's how commercial media has functioned forever, whether it's the Platform or the Herald or RNZ.
No. The Platform doesn't take money from people. It advertises like most people do, but we don't get editorial instruction. I mean, we're also not a news media organisation. We're sort of a talk news function in many ways.
Sure.
We don't pretend to be the relayers of unbiased, if you like, information, do we? As journalists.
Okay, it's not a journalistic enterprise, but it is a source of information and analysis for a lot of people.
Yes,
and
that's right.
And I'm not criticising, the Platform for whatever financial background it might have, but increasingly because the public are so much more sceptical about or have so much less trust in media, I think all media outlets are going to have to front foot this and be a lot more upfront about their books, basically.
Yeah, well, listen, I've got no difficulty with transparency at all, and in actual fact, it's well recognised, the Platform, its funding organisation, its origins and its background. But I guess I'm more concerned that organisations like, for example, in NetSafe, it's not just Microsoft, Meta and Chorus who are funding NetSafe.
Departments.
Exactly, government departments. I mean, what?
Yes, I think it's problematic too. I mean, I'm not sure to what extent you can get around it because NGOs always need money to operate. You do actually need funding, but it becomes a problem when these NGOs and when they are needing to be independent, they're not independent of the state and they end up being quasi-state organisations. So, I mean, it's a similar... In my column, I point out Transparency International New Zealand, the anti-corruption watchdog here in the country, is funded kind of like about 80 or 90% by government institutions such as the SIS, GCSB, etc. And so, that does create a problem because, transparency is supposed to be a watchdog on the state institutions, but they're going to be much less inclined to, speak out against them if they're funded and, depending on them to exist.
Yeah, you've been very strong on, we're using NetSafe as an example because it's the last thing you've written about, and how NetSafe is supported by Meta. I think they make that as a big deal in actual fact, so one would presume that Meta in actual fact are a major funder, if not the major funder of NetSafe. So rightly you say, well, how much does that influence? Well, of course it's going to influence policy.
Yeah.
I mean, no one's going to bite the hand that feeds them, will they?
Well, that sums it up, isn't it? Yeah, no one's going to bite the hand that feeds them. And so when people listen to NetSafe's, their arguments, they should take that into account. And I just don't think that enough people do realise that NetSafe are funded by these big tech platforms.
Yeah, no, okay. But then you've also been very strong on, and certainly in the last 6 months, Bryce, the articles that I've seen you write for the Democracy Project as well, that the role of lobbyists itself, and it was problematic before this government, I mean, it was in the last government as well, that the role of lobbyists seems so poorly defined in this country, and one might argue has the capacity for corruption. We're not just seeing that in terms of big corporates coming in here or particular activists getting involved with funding of particular parties or individuals, but we're also seeing it in terms of cabinet ministers leaving their ranks and immediately becoming lobbyists, paid lobbyists with access to all their mates sitting around the cabinet table who are making decisions. We don't have a lobbyist code in this country or that kind of transparency, do we?
We don't have any regulations in this country about lobbying. It's an issue that's kind of risen up globally in the last 2 decades, and people have become more and more, I guess, sceptical or sensitive about the power of wealth and of organised interests in the political process. And so in other countries, yes, they've brought in lots of new regulations. One common mechanism is just to have a register of who is lobbying politicians and officials, and to have some details about what lobbying they're doing and who their clients are. We don't have anything like that. We don't have a code of conduct for what they're allowed to do. Yes, in this last government, I think it became particularly more colourful, shall we say, or more obvious. I think it's been around for a while, but you had over the length, the 6 years of the Ardern Hipkins government, you had 5 chiefs of staff. So these are the people that are the main sort of non-politician running the beehive. So over that time, 4 of them were lobbyists, i.e. they had worked in lobbying either before or after their jobs. So, this is people like Neil Jones, lots of others. And so, yeah, it's really problematic to give those sort of people such high access to what ministers are doing, and then allow them to work in the private sector.